Some products totally change the game. It looks like a bicycle, but its power puts scooters to shame and challenges light motorcycles. That's exactly what the beast standing right behind me is, Aniioki A9 Pro Max. The manufacturer promises power here that outclasses scooters and a battery that seems to never run out. I check how much of this is just marketing and how much is true. But besides that, we have to answer one important question. Is it even possible to drive such a powerful machine on the roads? Stay with me, because the answers might surprise you. This is Pavel, and you're watching the Tech Maniac HD channel. The machine itself weighs 85 kilograms, and with the accessories that came to me, the total weight reached 97. The main box weighs over 66 kilograms. Bringing these three packages into the house alone is quite a challenge. The medium box weighs over 20 kilograms, and on top of that, it doesn't have any handles, which really makes the task harder. Along with the bike, the set includes free extras. Let's check them out. There's a practical combination chain lock here. It may not be a heavy-duty chain like those for expensive motorcycles, but these 5 or 7 millimeter links are more than enough for short-term bike locking. The set also includes a reflective vest and a typical bike helmet, which is surprisingly comfortable. And here's an important note. Treat it only as a nice freebie. When you decide to ride at higher speeds, your safety is the most important thing. That's why you should replace it with a real certified motorcycle helmet. Side mirrors are a nice addition. Personally, I think the flame design on the carbon background is a bit tacky, but fortunately, you quickly stop paying any attention to it. The ball joint adjustment lets you easily customize them. The manufacturer also offers optional accessories. I decided to go with this metal transport basket. It's incredibly heavy and looks solid. Its bottom isn't just a thin sheet of metal, but a really thick plate. But that's not a problem, because the bike has an official maximum load capacity of 225 kilograms. This shows what a powerful construction we're dealing with here. This basket is definitely over the top, but with a machine this powerful, those extra kilograms really don't make any difference. It attaches in various positions, closer to the driver or farther away, though farther placement blocks the rear light. Alternatively, sideways is likely best. On the manufacturer's website, there's also a dedicated bag, although you'll easily find suitable alternatives at any good bike shop. We can choose brake pads, another lock or mirrors, as well as puncture-resistant inner tubes. The paperwork is clear, but it's actually an operating manual, not an assembly guide. And you know what? That's actually not a problem at all. Assembling this beast is surprisingly simple, and interestingly, doesn't require much space. That small space between the television and the couch was enough for me. The manufacturer also includes a pretty decent set of tools. The only things missing were a Phillips screwdriver for installing the lamp and a size 22 wrench, which is only needed to remove the fork's transport protection. Surprisingly, most of the assembly can be done on your own. Of course, not many people can lift 66 kilograms with one hand, but you just need to cut the box open from the side to handle it by yourself. The only moment when you'll need a second person is when putting on the front wheel. You can easily do the rest on your own. Take your time, 2 hours to unpack, assemble, and the machine is ready for action. Before we turn on this beast, let's talk about its safety features, because there's a lot to talk about. There are 2 key remotes here, and this is really clever. On the steering wheel, there's what looks like a start button, but it's actually for changing the drive mode, which I'll discuss later. The only way to start this beast is with the remote. It's a smart anti-theft feature. If someone tries to ride the bike outside a store, they'll just be confused and unable to go anywhere. Without the remote, all the thief can do is pedal, and with this weight, even with 7 Shimano gears, it would actually be easier for him to just steal a regular bike. On top of that, there's a built-in alarm that we can arm with the remote. Interestingly, not only moving the bike, but even turning the pedal crank immediately triggers a loud siren. The remote includes a handy location feature. Pressing this button activates a less annoying than the alarm, but still loud sound signal, which will help you find your bike in a crowded parking lot. But there's one more brilliant layer of security. In the vehicle menu, you can set a personal identification number code, so even if someone takes the remote out of your pocket, the bike still won't start without the personal identification number. This actually makes it much easier to steal someone's car. You also get 2 regular keys in the set. These are now used solely for one purpose, to unlock and remove this powerful battery. My advice is this: keep them at home, because there's really no point in carrying them with you every day. The driving position is comfortable, and everything we need is within reach. The central feature is a large display. The screen is bright, but be careful, it becomes invisible when you're wearing polarized sunglasses. The turn signals are a brilliant addition. The front ones have a blue LED on the driver's side. This is supposed to help you remember to turn off the turn signal, but I have to admit, I still forgot sometimes. The front lamp is more than a regular LED, it's nearly a real headlight. It has a professional sharp light cutoff so we won't blind others. The switch for low and high beams is located right under your right thumb. It's also a horn that sounds just like a real scooter. From the menu screen, we can customize this beast to our preferences. There are many interesting features and settings here, such as adjusting the screen brightness, units, sleep mode, maximum speed limit, and various others, but I mainly want to mention boost intensity. This allows you to reduce the throttle sensitivity, and for beginner users, I recommend lowering this so-called kick from 3 to 1 or maybe even to level 0. However, this display is not just for device settings. It's also a multimedia center on the handlebar. We can connect to the display via Bluetooth, which allows us to play music from a smartphone. And how does it sound? Well, I don't think anyone will be surprised that they don't sound particularly good. They're loud, sure, but that's basically the only positive thing I can say about them. Their main job is to play interface sounds or alarms, and they do that just fine. But the manufacturer does deserve some credit for including a USB-C port here, which allows you to charge your smartphone. And yes, you heard that right, it's just some small plus, because even though the port works, it charges with a staggering power of 2 watts, so if your phone's screen is on, it'll still lose battery. At the front of the screen, there's a camera that works as a dash cam, recording in full high-definition resolution with pretty decent quality and even with sound. In case anything happens on the road, you have undeniable proof of what really happened, showing that it definitely wasn't your fault. This is definitely a great feature. You can play back these recordings directly from the steering wheel, which can be really useful even while you're on the road. Transferring these recordings to your computer is also no problem, because everything is saved on a pre-installed 32GB microSD card. Okay, let's finally get to what's most important. How does it actually drive, and how do you control all that monstrous power? We have 2 ways to unleash it here, the throttle and the pedal assist system, but the key to everything is the 5 power levels. And don't think of them like gears, they're actually power gates. Each subsequent level from 1 to 5 gives you access to more power and higher speed. And most importantly, these gates work globally, both for the throttle and for pedal assist. Level 0 is like neutral. Both the throttle and pedal assist are inactive, but the dashcam and other systems are, of course, still working. Level 1 is the walk mode. The power is minimal, the speed is limited to about 11 km per hour. Even with the throttle fully open, the acceleration is very, very gentle. The second level is livelier but still relaxing, comparable to the maximum acceleration of a regular 250-watt bicycle. The maximum assisted speed here is 25 km per hour, and in my opinion, it's a very pleasant, relaxing mode where the noise of the wind doesn't bother you. And this in turn allows you to enjoy the silence and the peace of the surroundings. And even if we run out of path, this second gear will easily pull us uphill even in the field. You can hear now how quiet and pleasant it is. The only rattling on the bumps comes from the loose headlight, and I admit that's my fault. I tightened it only later in the evening. Now, level 3, which is, you could say, my golden mean, perfect for the city. It's already strong enough to get us into traffic dynamically and safely, even uphill, but still predictable enough to feel confident with it on dry asphalt. Where there's no asphalt, and with two-wheel drive, it can already tear up the surface. Remember, level 3 is still only 47% of maximum power. This level 3 is already a setting that brings a lot of fun on gravel surfaces. I'm still getting familiar with this bike, so I'm only gently adding throttle on this unpaved path. The speed we can reach in third gear is about 33 kilometers per hour. Level 4 can definitely be called road mode with a maximum of 50 kilometers per hour. On the other hand, fifth gear is beast mode, where we unleash the full potential and maximum speed. And the best part is, if these factory power thresholds don't suit you, you can precisely adjust them in the menu under the pulse width modulation setting tab. Each of the 5 levels has a value assigned from 0 to 255, which determines what percentage of the maximum power is available. The first level is 45, providing 18% power or about 400 watts. The second level gives 33% over 700 watts. The third level delivers around 1000 watts. This is customization for true enthusiasts, allowing you to perfectly tailor the bike's characteristics to your own needs. Note the walking mode, capped at 6 kilometers per hour. You activate it by holding down the minus button on the controller for a moment. On the first 3 levels, you can choose the drive type manually, to the front, rear, or both wheels. The 2-wheel drive is the most powerful but also consumes the most power. Switching to level 4 or 5 automatically engages drive to both wheels. And here I have to admit that I'm an absolute fan of rear-wheel drive. As drivers say, if God wanted us to drive front-wheel drive cars, we'd be walking on our hands. But seriously, at lower levels and with gentle driving, you might not feel a big difference. But in third gear, with only front-wheel drive set, the power can already break the traction of the front wheel. Rear-wheel drive gives a much more pleasant and natural riding characteristic. Initially, I was afraid of such power, but separating torque, delivery, and speed into 5 levels is a brilliant solution. You can't just turn on the bike, hit the throttle by accident, and have it shoot off like a slingshot. That's not possible. The bike only starts in neutral. Before you get to 5th gear, you have to go through all the previous ones, and you can't do that by accident. Once you get the hang of it and the road conditions allow, then you can try higher power levels. We know that even with its great power, this beast is very predictable and safe to control. But now let's explain where this surface-tearing driving force actually comes from. The heart of this beast is 2 powerful engines, and don't look for them in the frame. These are direct drive motors, which means they are built directly into the hubs of both wheels. Because of this, all the power transfers directly to the surface without losses in the chain or gears, unlike mid-drive motors. And what about the power? Here's a very important note. It depends on the battery version you choose. I'm testing the 70 amp hour model. Its total nominal power is 2200 watts, and at peak it can generate exactly 5600 watts. However, if you decide on the version with a larger 80 amp hour battery, the nominal power increases to 2500 and the peak reaches an impressive 6000 watts. What's most interesting is that this jump in power and capacity does come with an increase in the total weight of the bike, but only by 1.5 kilograms, which makes choosing the 80 amp hour version a very tempting option. But what is responsible for that brutal takeoff in both versions is the gigantic torque, which according to the manufacturer is as much as 250 Newton meters. That number is the real secret behind its incredible performance. Direct drive engines also mean absolute silence. There are no internal gear transmissions here that grind or make noise. All you hear are the tires and the whoosh of air. Secondly, their brain, which is 2 independent controllers, not only provides better cooling, but also serves as a brilliant safety buffer. In an extreme case, God forbid, if one of the controllers fails, the other one still works, powering one wheel. You won't be stranded in the middle of nowhere with an 86 kilogram problem. You'll always make it home. And yes, that's what the pedals are for, but let's be realistic. The average cyclist generates about 100 to 200 watts of continuous power. With over 2000 watts at the throttle daily, maintaining 10 or 15 kilometers per hour using just muscle power feels much harder. Considering the weight and the massive rolling resistance of these extremely wide tires, let's not be afraid to say it, it's an astronomical effort. But what about reliability? Is there anything that needs to be done here? Do we need to service this kind of bike in any special way? A major benefit of direct drive is its nearly maintenance-free operation. Many electric bikes have the motor mounted centrally, and all the power is transferred through the chain and sprockets. It's a constant struggle with grease, cleaning, adjusting, and the inevitable wear of all those parts, which of course generates more costs and, most importantly, takes up our valuable time. Here, that problem simply doesn't exist. The power goes straight from the engine to the wheel. The mechanism is hermetically sealed. Because there are no parts inside it that touch and wear out, there's simply no need to ever service it. This solution is brilliant in its simplicity and practically failure-free. The only thing worth paying attention to is the seal around the cable entering the motor shaft. If we scrape it somewhere, it's worth checking if it hasn't been damaged. Of course, there are still other standard maintenance tasks left. Remember to periodically check the spoke tension, especially with this weight and power. After many thousands of kilometers, the bearings on which the motor rotates also usually wear out. Most electric bikes last over 100,000 kilometers before making any noise. So that's a perspective for years of very intense riding. Now let's move on to the element that defines the character of this beast, to its power source. And I'll say right away, it's not just any battery. It's a gigantic mobile energy storage unit. We have a 60-volt system here, and my 70 amp-hour version holds 4,200 watt-hours of energy. To give you some scale, that's 6 to 7 times more so-called juice than in a typical powerful electric bike. Inside, Aniioki used modern automotive blade-type cells, based on a concept popularized by the giant from the world of electric cars, BYD. This technology guarantees greater efficiency and safety than old battery solutions. The unit is encased in 4mm aluminum armor, protecting the valuable cells from impacts and faults. Additionally, it is waterproof and fireproof. And what about its lifespan? Well, the manufacturer claims a lifespan of 3,000 full charging cycles. And now the most important part. That doesn't mean that after that time the battery dies and is only good for throwing away. This is a guarantee that only after those 3,000 full charging cycles will its original capacity drop to 80%. Let's think about what this means in practice. If you charge this giant battery quite often, for example, twice a week, simple math tells us that reaching the 80% capacity threshold will take you almost 30 years. Of course, after 10 or 15 years, the chemistry in the cells will naturally age. However, these numbers show us that this battery is so oversized that it's practically impossible for us to wear it out through normal charging. We already know that this battery is practically indestructible, but how far can it take us on a single charge? In laboratory conditions, the manufacturer promises some totally astronomical values, reaching up to 400 kilometers in pedal assist mode. Of course, that's just theory, but let's look at the data that interests us the most, which is the range using only the throttle without pedaling, so the most energy-consuming scenario. Here, Aniioki claims a range of 130 to 140 kilometers. And let's be honest, I assume most of you don't cover such distances to work every day and back. In practice, this means you can ride for 2, 3, maybe even 4 days before you even think about looking for a socket. It could also be a long weekend trip out of town, and that's without the slightest worry about range. Charging such a gigantic battery, even with power exceeding 500 watts, will still take a while. The manufacturer says a full cycle from 0 to 100% should take 7 to 8 hours. Based on my experience, the first charge, starting from the last bar on the indicator, took 6 hours. Even more importantly, throughout the entire charging process, the battery remained completely cool, and the power supply itself, thanks to active cooling, was at most slightly warm and only in certain spots. The only downside of this solution is the noise. Unfortunately, the fan in the power supply is quite loud, so charging the bike in the bedroom or while watching a movie is totally out of the question for me. But what if you're a professional courier and even 140 kilometers is just not enough for you? And this brings us to a very important point. In that case, you can buy an additional battery. This is a great option for such professionals. One battery charges in the base while you work on the road with the other. 0 downtime, and you can drive from morning till night. Everything's great, but this charger draws 534 watts straight from the socket, and it does so for many, many hours. That electricity will probably cost a fortune. With the current electricity prices in Poland, fully charging from 0 to 100% costs just 2 zlotys and 87 groszy. That's less than a liter of gasoline, even less than a bus ticket. That's the real strength of electric transportation. Let's put aside all those numbers and specifications and talk about how all of this translates into the driving experience. According to the manufacturer's recommendation, I inflated these giant tires to just 1.1 bar. That makes them incredibly soft. The result? First of all, absolutely brilliant grip. The bike literally sticks to the asphalt. Secondly, the comfort is unbelievable. All the small bumps, pebbles, or cracks in the road are wonderfully absorbed, and you don't feel them at all. But there's also the other side of the coin. Such low pressure means gigantic rolling resistance. You can feel the tires slow the bike on flat terrain. We use such pressure to maximize comfort or in difficult terrain. If you want to break speed records and maximize range on asphalt, the best pressure is likely between 1.5 and 2 bars. Alright, but how is it with riding? Let's start with impressions from riding in the city. Here, the enormous power and sufficient speed make it easy to keep up with cars moving smoothly in city traffic. Thanks to this, you don't have to stick closely to the curb. At the start from the lights, not only do we not get left behind, but we often pull ahead of everyone, at least those who aren't peeling out or trying to race us. With this two-wheeler, we can feel like full-fledged road users, not just someone who's constantly being pushed to the side. In city riding, comfort is also important, and here the pneumatic front fork does an excellent job. What's more, this red knob on top allows you to adjust the rebound damping, which is a feature known from expensive motorcycle suspensions. In practice, this means we can perfectly adjust the fork's performance so that the front wheel sticks to the surface instead of bouncing on it like a ball. But the rear, unfortunately, it confirms our concerns. Every bigger pothole or speed bump gives a noticeable springy jolt. You can live with it, and it does absorb some of it, but a spring without a shock absorber isn't what I expected. Maneuvering this 86-kilogram tank between cars in traffic obviously takes a bit of skill. But does that mean it's unwieldy? I wouldn't really say that either. Once you get the hang of operating the throttle precisely and adjust the power level, you'll have no trouble learning to weave between cars stopped at the lights. And even though, as we've established, this vehicle shouldn't be used on bike paths, its bicycle-like shape makes squeezing through tight barriers no problem at all, at least unlike a scooter. And since we're talking about city riding, we also have to mention going over speed bumps. As you can see, even at 50 or 60 kilometers per hour, these longer speed bumps aren't a problem. It's true getting out of the saddle is more comfortable, but I must admit, I also have to slow to at least 40 here in a car. Well, at 50 it bounces too much, so in this respect, the advantage of Aniioki over a passenger car is undeniable. When it comes to those shorter, more aggressive speed bumps, as everyone knows, they're the most annoying no matter what you're driving. The comfort on the A9 is still higher than in a car, but the biggest advantage of this two-wheeler is definitely its agility. Unlike in a car, we can often just cleverly avoid such an obstacle. And how does such a beast behave on the road, out in the open? Here, Aniioki A9 Pro Max is like a train à grande vitesse train on the tracks. The massive weight makes it incredibly stable at higher speeds, and thanks to the wide and comfortable saddle, you feel absolutely confident on it even on uneven asphalt. It's a long-distance cruiser made for routes. Do you have 100 kilometers to cover? Well, that's no problem. Just remember to take your charger and dress well, because the airflow at higher speeds can be relentless. Sure, you'll say you can handle a long flat route even with a 250-watt bike. Maybe slower, but it's doable. The real challenge starts, however, when a steep hill appears on the road. That's why it's time to answer the question, how does Aniioki handle climbs? I recently tested an Engve brand bike with a power of 250 watts on this exact hill. And even though it had a boost button that temporarily increased the power to around 500 watts, despite my pedaling, although I managed to get up, it wasn't easy at all and the speed noticeably dropped. And Aniioki, it's still easy at the third power level. We maintain a steady speed of 17 kilometers per hour. You might say it can do anything once moving, but can it start from a standstill on a steep incline? Well, let's check that too. I'm starting in 5th gear. The front wheel loses traction, and you can feel the beast biting into the asphalt and picking up more and more speed. And it's not at all the case that the A9 Pro Max owes its smooth start only to that temporary almost 6,000 watt boost. Not at all. Here, I have maybe a less steep but really long uphill climb. Look, I'm starting uphill on the first power level, and sure, it's weak. We only see 5 kilometers per hour after a moment, but that's just walking mode. Switching to level 2, I quickly speed up to 12 or even 15 kilometers per hour. On level 3, it's even smoother. In just a moment, I can see 25 kilometers per hour on the speedometer. 4th gear reaches 35 and 5th goes higher, but I'm already at the top and need to brake. And what will happen when we leave the asphalt? These gigantic, wide, almost 5-inch tires with aggressive knobby tread are just begging for forest trails or sandy beaches. And that's where this equipment gives you the most fun. With 2-wheel drive and nearly 6,000 watts of peak power, we can really go hard off-road. Most electric bikes shouldn't even try to go onto a sandy beach because their 250 watts and not wide enough tires are simply not enough. But here, that power combined with 2-wheel drive goes like a storm. To give you some context, 5,600 watts of peak power is about 7.5 horsepower, which is half of what a 125 cubic centimeter motorcycle offers. But there's one catch: a combustion engine needs to rev up. On the other hand, here the maximum torque is available right from the start, without any downshifting. You hit the throttle and feel a strong pull forward. Riding on the beach is amazing, but what about in the forest? And here I have to point out right away that the wide-angle lens on the camera really flattens the perspective. The hills you see here are actually much steeper in reality. In these conditions, the 2-wheel drive and the tires make its climbing abilities simply unbelievable. Even at the 3rd power level, Aniioki gives the impression of a rover that in difficult terrain can match the capabilities of a quad. Thanks to the instant torque, unlike a combustion engine, it never lacks power. It just pulls uphill like a tank on tracks. It seems like nothing can stop it, but the only weak point of this design is the low, mounted crank with a chainring, which we can catch on short but very steep hills. And you know what? I have to admit something to you, maybe even with a bit of embarrassment. I know that many of you are probably looking for a reasonable and economical way to get to work. And sure, this equipment meets all those conditions. But the truth is, this machine gives you so much pure, unrestrained fun off-road that you always end up with a big grin on your face. Because while it's nice to ride this bike to work every day, it's only on the weekend, when we don't have to do anything and can do everything, that the real magic happens. This is the moment when we feel unrestrained freedom and remind ourselves that life isn't just about sitting at work and responsibilities, but there's also room for pleasure. Sure, we rest on the couch in front of the television after work, but that kind of rest often doesn't really give us any energy. And going wild outdoors or on the beach, that's, my dear friends, something completely different. Every hill you conquer, every burst of energy on the sand truly relieves stress and boosts your zest for life. And that's exactly something you can't measure in watts or kilometers. And you know what? This vehicle gave me a lot of joy. Much more than I could have ever expected. It just so happens that I live in an apartment building and I simply wouldn't have anywhere to keep a motorcycle. Not in a way someone wouldn't steal it, burn it, or even knock it over in a week. Storing an electric bike in the apartment or on the balcony is easy. Sure, it might not be the perfect solution, but if you don't have a garage and you can find a bit of space for a bike like that, it's better than nothing. And here I have to tell you about my biggest logistical challenge. What do you do when you have an 86-kilogram monster and an elevator that turns out to be too small? I secretly hoped Aniioki would fit in, but it's just not going to happen. You can't bring it in here on the back wheel either. So, I'm taking the bike down the stairs. Take your time. There's no need to rush. On the landing, lift the back, turn, and continue down. Getting the bike through the narrow apartment doors isn't a problem either, but you probably think the worst part is carrying it back upstairs. Surprisingly, the tall soft tires make it not bad at all. I shift into first gear, gently add some throttle, and the 2-wheel drive does most of the work for me, pulling the bike up the stairs. The landing in my apartment building is very small and cramped, but in typical Polish apartment blocks there's much more space, so turning around on the landing should be much easier there. This odd maneuver works because most of the vehicle's weight is at the front. Only when we sit on it does the weight distribute evenly on both wheels, providing full stability while riding. And in a situation like this, when we carry it, the light rear makes it easy to lift with one hand, and the sturdy rack works perfectly as a convenient handle. Using your thigh for support can help even weaker people succeed. Anyway, in the video, you can see it's only my first time coming back from a ride, so I didn't have much practice yet, but I still think it went quite smoothly. And yes, you understand correctly, you can keep an electric one in your apartment, but storing a combustion gasoline scooter already breaks fire safety regulations. That's why a key question comes up here as well. Since this beast is so powerful and basically enters motorcycle territory, why not just buy a regular combustion scooter with an engine capacity of 50 or even 125 cubic centimeters? That's a very good question, so let's do a quick summary. Let's start with the costs. Traveling 100 kilometers on the A9 costs just over 2 zlotys. The same distance on a scooter, with current fuel prices, costs between 15 and 20 zlotys, which is about 10 times more expensive. Unlike scooters, which can't be charged with an office socket, you can easily recharge the Aniioki's batteries at work. I'm sure many will use this, making travel costs for thousands of kilometers nearly zero. But that's just the start of the benefits, since scooters also require oil changes, filters, and spark plugs. With the Aniioki, all those costs and, more importantly, problems simply don't exist. Okay, but what about the ride itself? Thanks to the instant torque, the electric A9 Pro Max catapults you from the lights with a force that the owner of a smaller scooter waiting for the engine to rev up can only dream of. Even if a 125 nominally has more power, the characteristics of combustion engines simply lag behind. Aniioki lets us zip around almost in absolute silence, without vibrations, without the embarrassing buzzing of a little scooter, and without the smell of exhaust fumes. This is a completely different, much more modern and pleasant dimension of transportation. Okay, but what about acceleration and top speed? I created specific tests to demonstrate what this beast can do at the highest 5th power level, rather than making general statements. Let's begin from a standstill. The first crucial in the city, 25 kilometers per hour, appears on the speedometer after just 3.6 seconds. We reach 50 in 9.2 seconds, and the arrival speed of 60 kilometers per hour is a matter of just under 13 seconds. This shows Aniioki delivers a powerful punch from the start and maintains strong, even pull at higher speeds. So, what about the top speed? As it turns out, it's not a single straightforward number, but a dynamic value that depends on the conditions. As you already know, the speed depends on the version of the bike. The more powerful model with an 80 amp-hour battery is rated at 74 km/h. My 70 amp-hour version is rated at exactly 68 km per hour on paper. And how does it look in practice? On flat terrain and with a fully charged battery, you can easily reach 70 km per hour with this version, which is actually a bit more than what the manufacturer promises. Interestingly, even when the battery level dropped to half, the bike was still able to maintain 69-70 km per hour, but under one condition. I had to be shielded from the wind, like on this stretch by the road, which I managed to record here. And what happens when we have only 1 or 2 bars of battery left? The speed drops, but it still stays at an impressive level of 65 to 67 kilometers. And that's the key takeaway for us. Even running on the last bit of power, this machine is still fast enough that we can easily keep up with cars and not be a roadblock. There probably is some drop in power as the battery discharges, but the wind was also a bit different in each of those places. Going downhill on a curve, I hit 76 kilometers per hour before braking, which again showed my inexperience with such fast bikes. So please forgive me, but I'll stop at this attempt. And you have to remember that I'm doing all these tests on tires with 1.1 bar. I assume that with road pressure, you'll easily break the 80 kilometers per hour barrier. A bit of craziness is behind us, but in the real world, even more important than starting from zero is acceleration while driving, for example when overtaking. I did a test riding calmly at 21 kilometers per hour on the 3rd power level. I switched to the 5th level and twisted the throttle all the way. It took just 6.2 seconds to reach 50. That's the kind of flexibility that gives you a huge sense of safety and confidence in city traffic. I've already told you about the absurd acceleration that happens here. But there's one more thing, and it's probably even more important. How do you stop this speeding bullet? Fortunately, these aren't ordinary brakes. They're not bicycle brakes. It's a fully hydraulic system with expansion tanks. And now take a look at these discs. 2 in front, 1 in back, each with a huge 300mm diameter. And the calipers? That's when the interesting story starts. At first glance, they look just as massive as the 6-piston calipers from a real motorcycle. However, upon closer inspection, it turns out that this is just a clever styling trick. There are smaller but still effective mechanisms hidden here. There are 2 piston front calipers and a single piston rear caliper, but hardware is only part of it. There are sensors in the brake levers that immediately cut off the engine power when you press them. So even if you accidentally twist the throttle all the way, the brake overrides the throttle. Okay, but how does this whole arsenal work in practice? Well, it's time for some braking tests. Stopping from 60 kilometers per hour took 2.3 seconds, and it happened over a distance of 16 meters. From 50, I braked in just under 2 seconds over just 9 meters, and from 30, I stopped in a second over 5 meters. But these meters and seconds don't fully reflect what's really happening here. The braking force at times exceeds 1G. That's a value from the world of sports motorcycles and cars. Of course, I want to emphasize that these results depend on your weight, the wind, the surface, and even the temperature, so treat them as purely indicative. They also depend on how hard you press the levers. These brakes are so powerful that squeezing the calipers too hard on the disc will actually lock the wheel. Losing traction at the rear just means worse braking performance, but at the front, well, you probably know yourself. Let's discuss documentation and legal status too. The manufacturer, which is a big plus, provides an official Conformité Européenne compliance certificate with the bike. You can see it on the screen now. This is an important document that confirms the product as an electrical device, meets all European Union safety standards, and can be legally sold on our market. It's a kind of guarantee that the battery, motors, and all the other electrical components are safe to use. However, you need to fully understand what this certificate means. It is issued under European Standard European Norm 15194. This standard applies to regular electric bicycles with up to 250 watts of power and a maximum speed of 25 kilometers per hour. The conclusion is that you are buying a fantastically built and safe machine, which is officially certified as a bicycle. But all the responsibility for how and where you use its powerful unlocked power, which goes far beyond these standards, rests solely on you. This is a compromise that you simply need to be aware of when choosing this equipment. I don't know how it is in Poland, but here in Ireland, every day I see dozens of bikes in the city whose power far exceeds 250 watts and are controlled with a throttle. Almost no one wears a bicycle helmet. And since we're already talking about compromises, let's talk about a few others that you also need to be aware of. First of all, pedaling without assistance. On asphalt, on a straight road, although it's tough, it's definitely doable, and I didn't really have any particular problem maintaining a fairly normal speed. When the road becomes less comfortable, it's still not a big deal. You need to push harder, but in emergencies, that's better than walking the bike. But on the grass, see for yourself. I'm standing on the pedal with all my weight, and that's on the lightest gear, and still I can't keep the bike moving. The heavy weight and large tires mean we couldn't get through the park without help. You might say, okay, but who would ride without power anyway? And this brings us to what I think is the biggest flaw of this design. Pedaling with assistance is really enjoyable, but only on the first and second levels. Then even riding on grass isn't a problem. However, the problem is the simple cadence sensor used here. It doesn't measure how hard you press on the pedals, only whether they're turning at all. If they are, the controller delivers the full driving force assigned to a specific power level, exactly as if you twisted the throttle all the way. Plus, it happens with about a 2-second delay. That's why it's okay on level 1 and 2, but on higher levels it's just ridiculous. Since I'm already nitpicking this section, I also want to complain about the loading time. 7 to 8 hours for such a huge battery is definitely a good result, but in practice, with current technology, you could probably charge it with a power of 2 kilowatts, which would shorten the full charging time to about 2 hours. But I'm just being picky. Also, the primitive rear suspension without shock absorbers deserves criticism as it bounces on bumps. Who is this beast really for? In my opinion, this is a machine for someone who commutes to work over a longer distance and is tired of the boredom of traveling at 25 kilometers per hour. The ability to cruise at 35, 50, or even up to 80 kilometers per hour makes a really big difference. It's also a perfect option for professional delivery people or couriers, for whom higher speed and a huge battery simply mean more completed orders, which translates to a higher daily income. Yes, Aniioki A9 Pro Max is even twice as expensive as a typical 250-watt bike, but it has 3 times the maximum speed and 3 times the range. And there's 6 times more power here than in the others, which makes riding this marvel give us energy and zest for life. That's why the third group of people who will love this vehicle are weekend explorers and tourism enthusiasts. I'm referring to those who, on their day off, want to leave the city's hustle, pack some food, and explore without worrying about maps or distance. For them, this enormous range means true freedom, the ability to ride all day without nervously glancing at the battery indicator. The powerful engine ensures even the steepest hill won't ruin their trip. And the relatively comfortable suspension and wide tires let you enjoy riding not only on asphalt but also on bumpy forest trails. It's the perfect machine for adventure. Now, let's answer the question, how much do you have to pay for such pleasure? You don't have to worry about shipping either, because the bikes for the European market are shipped from a warehouse in Poland. Exactly. Though I live in Ireland, this unit was shipped to me from Wolka Kosowska near Warsaw, Poland. That means 2 things. First, you pay no customs duties or import taxes. Second, delivery time is express. Usually takes 5 to 10 business days. Is that price high? Even after such a huge discount, that's still a lot of money. But if you look at it as an alternative to a scooter, considering you don't need oil or filter service and the cost of electricity is up to 10 times lower than fuel, the offer just becomes unbeatable.